Good afternoon, Mr. Kilbart reporting. Now I know what a lot of you may be wondering. What on earth was I doing back there? Well, I was doing none other than reenact the ultimate, well-known invasion known as Operation Overlord, commonly referred to as D-Day. Now today I'll be discussing the important facts of D-Day, the 5 W's plus how, some interesting facts regarding D-Day, how I would rank this battle compared to the Battle of the Bulge and the Battle of Berlin, how this battle should be remembered, and some primary and secondary evidence of this, mainly quotes from some soldiers and some leaders of D-Day. First things first, who was involved in D-Day? Now, in terms of the Allies, Canada, which was tasked with conquering Juno Beach, the United States, which was tasked with conquering Omaha Beach and Utah Beach, and Great Britain, which was tasked with conquering Gold and Sword Beach. What was D-Day? The Allied objective of D-Day was to drive back German forces residing off the coast of France, and France was originally an Allied nation who was seized by Germany back in the fall of France in 1940. D-Day later ended up in liberating France from German influence and pushing back the territory of the Germans. When did D-Day take place? The actual day itself was June 6th, 1944, but further advances lasted until July of 1945. The 75th anniversary just took place on June 6th, 2019, and it is almost the 76th anniversary coming up in just less than a month. Where did D-Day take place? The Allies had attacked German positions at Normandy, located on the northern coast of France. Why did D-Day take place? The Allies on the Western Front were all aware of Stalingrad and the German defeats to Russia out on the Eastern Front. This invasion, Operation Overlord, known by Prime Minister Churchill and President Roosevelt, would need to take place so that the Soviets in Eastern Europe wouldn't gain a foothold upon them. In other words, they were fearful of the Soviet Union eventually driving their influence and capturing Germany by themselves, because they feared the threat of communism. Another goal of D-Day was, of course, to liberate France and to push back the territorial occupancy of the Germans. Now, how did D-Day take place? How did this all transpire? Now, how was it a victory? Well, first of all, the Allies wanted to surprise German forces, and so they decided to invade the beach on a day with bad weather. As a German meteorologist had predicted, there would be no advances on June 6th due to severe weather conditions. So the Allies knew they had to have the element of surprise, which they nailed down. Also, they needed immense planning beforehand for the invasion, and the idea of a large invasion on the coast of France began as early as July 1943, which was the previous July, in which they knew they had to free France from German control and push back the Germans. Now, one of the biggest reasons this was a success that a lot of people don't know about was the Allied bombing that took place 3 months prior to the invasion, in which the leaders of Allied nations planned to isolate the battlefield behind the beaches ahead of the assault. Homes, churches, historical buildings, and railways were all destroyed in this bombing. The Allied leaders knew this had to be done in order to prevent German flanking and to cut off German supply lines. Without these two features, Germany would have a real tough time when the invasion were to eventually strike. Towns destroyed in this bombing include Tilly-la-Campagne, Vire, Villers-Cabage, Le Havre, Caen, Falaise, Lisieux, and Saint-Leo. Casualties and results of this bombing are still coming out today. Now that I've drilled your brains with some good information covering the 6 W's, I'll go over some interesting facts. D-Day was the largest amphibious invasion with approximately 156,000 Allied forces spread across a 50-mile stretch of Normandy. D-Day was considered the beginning of the end of the war in Europe by many military historians. The Allies had used a tide prediction machine from which Sir Arthur Dudson was able to predict at some point when ocean currents would be most favorable for the Allies, which was June 5th to 7th. One technological innovation that the Allies had introduced was something known as a horse-glider, which was newly created and used to transport troops and supplies to Normandy. Now that I've covered some facts about it, I will go with my personal opinion of this battle compared to the Battle of the Bulge and the Battle of Berlin. In my opinion, this battle is the most significant compared to the Battle of Berlin and the Battle of the Bulge, as for the main reason that without D-Day, the Battle of the Bulge and the Battle of Berlin might not have taken place. Before D-Day, Russia was dominating in the Eastern Front. However, in the Western Front, Germany still had a lot of territory with the occupation of France, as France was actually one of their neighbors and a large nation. But after the liberation of France and devastating German forces, D-Day was able to literally cut the German army in half on the Western Front. Now, the reason why I think D-Day is more important than the Battle of the Bulge and the Battle of Berlin is because the Battle of the Bulge was more of a defensive attack than an offense. All that accomplished was prevent Hitler and his forces from expanding again. And the Battle of the Berlin was inevitable beyond D-Day. A defeat for the Germans was guaranteed at that point, and it was going to happen anyways, but D-Day was the real turning point, in my opinion. Now, how should this battle be remembered? This battle should be remembered as a glorious time for the Western Allies, especially the nations of Canada, America, and Great Britain. This was a pivotal moment in the war and really turned the tides. That is why I also considered it as one of the most important battles, is it because it was the turning point, a climactic battle in the war. However, at the same time, this battle should also be remembered with knowledge to the Allied bombing which took place 3 months prior, which sadly a lot of people do not know about. A lot of people should know that nearly 60,000 people's lives were devastated after that bombing, either resulting in death, loss of homes, shelters, or possibly wounds and injuries. Now, last but not least, last thing I'll be covering today is going over some quotes, some famous quotes by some people involved in D-Day. Future President Dwight D. Eisenhower told soldiers on one of the American beaches, "And let us all beseech the blessing of Almighty God upon this great and noble undertaking." Winston Churchill, British Prime Minister, stated, "I have full confidence in your courage, determination to duty, and skill in battle. We will accept nothing less than full victory. Good luck." Both of these leaders motivating and compelling the soldiers to fight bravely to succeed. Franklin D. Roosevelt once said, "They fight not for the lust of conquest. They fight to end conquest. They fight to liberate." And here are a few quotes from soldiers in D-Day. This upcoming quote comes from Private David Kenyon Webster. "All I could see was water. Miles and miles of water. But this was D-Day and nobody went back to England. And a lot of infantry riding in open barges, seasick, to the low-tide beaches were depending on us to draw the Germans off the causeways and gun batteries. And so, as Porter hurled himself against me, I grabbed both sides of the door and threw myself at the water." As a side note, it is important to take in mind that most of the Allied soldiers on foot arrived by landing craft, which was a ship that came through the water, and they opened the doors and the Allies would come out. However, sadly, a lot of these forces were drilled down by machine guns almost as soon as the door was opened. Now, one interesting novel which I discovered just last week was a novel known as Crusade in Europe, written by Dwight D. Eisenhower, which features a collection of memoirs from D-Day soldiers and primarily a senior military officer. Looking into a bit of this book, it is a very good collection of the facts and figures behind D-Day. And if you want to go look more into it, I strongly advise looking into the book. I will say it once more, Crusade in Europe by Dwight D. Eisenhower. That's all for today, folks. Mr. Kilbart speaking, and now, time to get back to reenacting the famous battle known as Operation Overlord. Heads out.